Hello, and as in keeping with a new habit, all posts, articles, and YouTube videos are addressed personally. This is addressed to two Daniels, and it also comes with thanks to a John and particularly Tracy, and she'll know exactly why. There's also a small note, housekeeping wise, that I'm recording this from a new and somewhat unusual location. We may hear the sound of helicopters and machinery and men working. I'm going to carry on. This is a half an hour video, I think, about, so forgive any interruptions. And it starts with a preface. Here goes. Lambing Learning number 5, Accept Reality. Preface. A friend and Hot News subscriber is curious, having followed the lambing learnings to date. She asks, has love grown alongside the lambs? The question lands on the day to pen this Accept Reality learning. And nearly a month later, as I type it up, it morphs itself into this video and into a much longer piece. It bursts deeper questions as how I ought to answer or how I might accurately answer and what accept reality really means. I read my notes from lambing, as sparse as what I know of their subjects. Death is inevitable, nature is brutal, hope is unhelpful, but remains. Now here's a trigger, or what I call a ripple alert. This piece covers dying. It's intimate, it's raw. So please only listen if your heart and mind are up to it. But it is also a celebration of living. And with a little irony, I would say it has a good ending. Here goes. That's your preface. So, answering my friend precisely is impossible, but easier now. And even then remains private. Has love grown alongside the lambs? Yes and or no, both and or neither is nearest to the truth. Maybe that's not the best question to answer. Actually, you, Tracy, and John confirming it, seed a better one, and it arrives in the conclusion. For now, let's return to early spring and those notes, but not in that order. Nature is brutal? Yes and no, neither and both. The ewes who, having birthed 3, then promptly lie down and smother one, which may or may not secure the lives of the other 2, brutal and or kind. The hawk finishing off a not quite dead ewe in the field by pecking its entrails and eyes out. Brutal and or kind. Thousands of dying men and women maintained semi-conscious by a cocktail of drugs and inevitably heading towards death, dutifully, painstakingly propping up a belief that dying is not inevitable, brutal and or kind. We so want to hunker down on one or the other, avoid reality, dupe ourselves into the safety of beliefs and what we think we might fix, change to lessen pain. I've always tried to avoid hunkering down in the misguided belief I would be excluding kind or love. And I still question whether reality needs the crutch of pretending to bank on what is an uncertain future, or to follow tamed societal domesticated behaviors. Increasingly, people seem to be pondering this question. That makes me glad. But today there are some additional questions. They jump in unasked for, and they are pertinent. Is man brutal? Is mankind a non sequitur? I hear a resounding yes, while the hate-fueling media campaign against Lucy Letby in the wake of deeply troubling baby murders burns bright. I honour your answer, however you answer. I honour the grieving, especially the inconsolable tears of parents deprived of parenting. But I also wonder if you, like me, have had a flicker of a thought for her parents, for whatever past horror or relentless and forlorn infatuation with a colleague flipped a nurse's mind to commit such acts, for the desperately misguided but possibly instinctive response by senior management to disbelieve that a neonatal nurse could also kill. These are not unnatural emotions and thoughts, however unacceptable, insane, or harmful the behaviours arising from them. There are no neat answers. All kinds of complicated reasons why are already being posited and comparisons drawn. Scapegoats are already being identified and being prepared to be strung up. Would accepting reality be a different starting place here now? Could it open up a space for understanding? Could future change for the better as senseful being prompts curiosity, and what, when, where, who, and how take precedence over the torture of why? Take precedence over ask covering, blame gaming, conjecturing, and assuming. I just wonder if it's simpler if all the answers to why could be summed up in somewhere along the line, in the here and now, we didn't accept reality and just listened. I just wonder. It happened is the reality now. Quiet, undramatic. It happened. That's enough. Now what? Accept reality. Ironically, the birth time of lambing gifted me the extraordinary preparation of accepting the reality of death. Life brought me face to face or hand to body with the temporal nature of all beings. That this subject arrives after an interlude which saw our dear dad die is fitting and oddly coincidental but perfect. I swapped choosing to write and release Motherwell, Lambing Learning number 4, ahead of this for no apparent reason. It just felt right. There we go. Our dad was mothered well by wife, daughters, and a stream of NHS carers and nurses, and gave us, his family, the rare privilege of witnessing his dying, which he undertook knowingly, bravely, and in his own way. Do you sense here that this was not something which happened to him? It was a verbing in which he alone participated. He had zero experience on how to do it, let alone do it well. No recollections to draw on, although buckets of support and loving witnesses to it. And he did it well, accepting, however scary and attractive, the compelling and unattractive. Interesting slip of the tongue. And unattractive, the compelling hand which ensured his, what do we call it, inevitable success in dying, what some will call death. Back to lambing. I began to learn that Accepting reality is responding without, or at least sidestepping, the distracting baggage of my or others' stories about it. This learning got bigger thanks to a mature you and a younger but lame ram in the Crocs pen during lambing, and of course later from Dad. In all three cases, my shepherd teacher's pithy observations, very short, were invaluable, if bitter to the taste at the time. Accepting reality is responding without, or at least sidestepping for a moment or two, the distracting baggage of my or other stories about it. The ram was lame on his front legs. He showed little interest in getting up on all fours, hobbling on his front knees. Like the ewe, he was given good care, had various treatments, but showed no signs of recovering. He seemed intent on proving the last two of the old adage, sheep have three wishes, to escape, go lame, or die. And he appeared not to be in pain. The ewe appeared intent on dying, slowly. Again, she had every comfort good animal husbandry affords, and showed no particular medical reasons for her malaise. She stood silently at the back of the pen for what seemed like an eternity, although it was probably only a few weeks. I suffered with her, conjuring up all kinds of rookie theories and stories about her condition and when she might die. It looked imminent to me. The shepherd said nothing, but continued to keep an eye on her. Hope long relinquished when it comes to dying, he nevertheless always allows for the unexpected. She had access to food and water and a soft bed to sit or lie on, if she chose, which she didn't any time I was present. I didn't hope she would live. I didn't want her to suffer. She couldn't speak. I couldn't know how much she was suffering. I hoped she would die soon. Why? In part to ease her suffering, and in part to ease my suffering. For a while I felt guilty about that. Now I accept it. Compassion is never very far from the surface, but sometimes hope obscures how it's best expressed, especially to ourselves. I would have suffered far less if I'd better learned to accept reality. Hope is unhelpful but remains? No, if you're lucky, it's relinquished. Fast forward a couple of months, during which time the ewe did die. I'm sitting at my dad's bedside, entertaining similar thoughts and feelings, except he can speak. And I know hope is best relinquished. He knows what's happening, and I entertain no hope that his body's going to recover. It's not for me to speak for what others in my family felt or believe. He speaks mainly through his body. I'm grateful for the pain-killing drugs. I'm also grateful for all the other tender responses of relief as an itch is rubbed away, for the squeeze of a hand, his hand, in gratitude, or that half smile in response to a funny quip or pun as they register. But not knowing when is tormenting me, and partly because of the pause his dying is having on how I've planned my life for the next few weeks. That's painfully true and honest. I'm in the middle of moving and completing a book which I've been procrastinating in finishing for ages. Accept reality. That includes the disruption to my world and accompanying exasperation of adapting and rearranging. I revisit the farm, since I'm rerouting to the shepherd's part of Berkshire. My feelings spill out. He will go when he is ready, a calm and steady voice intones more than once. Accept reality. And for fuck's sake, don't tell him he's free to go. Shit. I thought that would be a kind thing to do. I'm such a beginner at this kind of witnessing. What can I say? Turns out very little. Some sharing of times past. Words too personal and private to recount. But the heart of what seems true and important is simple and is probably universally applicable. Love is here. That's evident in all ways, from him and everyone surrounding him. But to be more truthful, there were also occasions when love appeared to be absent. That's the recent and more honest afterword. I added in, you have all the time you need to do this. You're doing this well, Dad. Did Dad always hear me? No knowing. But knowing hearing is the last thing to go was helpful. And an inner trust that somehow love is sensed and that there is no right and wrong in these situations. It's curious, isn't it? Reality accepts whatever the situation is benignly. It's us who have trouble with it. So that's how accepting reality then felt true. We were assisted hugely by the carers and district nurses who were utterly uncompromising in being faithful to the reality of the situation too. They've long learned to accept reality. My looks and whispers out of his hearing, how soon, were always met with the infinitely kind ways of saying, every dying is different. We can't know. Like the shepherd, they remained true to life, despite the mind's plaintive bleating for some sort of certainty. Accept reality. There is no certainty. As a family, husband, wife, and 2 daughters, we chose to honour life however fragile it appeared, exactly as it was being in the centre of our home. There was only really the present. Because it's what Dad wanted, because we're a family, because while dying and now grieving are happening, so is life happening. Life happening irrespective of the presence of the shadow of death. And yet all those potential reasons why, they're all stories. It simply happened like that. Accept reality. Our time when someone's world was slowly dying was rich. Rich with living and love. With what? Let me attempt to count the ways and fail. Tender, strong, happy, sad, funny, painful, surprising, poignant, scary, boring, exhausting, liberating, curious, enlightening, soft, hard, distressing, unifying, and probably every other feeling and adjective imaginable in between. I feel privileged to have engaged in this witnessing, despite the demands none of us ever realized it would involve. Now life's happening without Dad's presence, albeit flooded with rememberings. Wilton Market packs up and the bubble of inconsequential chat fills a cafe. Birthing, dying, celebrating and grieving, inseparable parts of living. In our nounified society, We make fuzzy edges into hard-lined forms. And it's natural to love the grand, precise, definitive appearance of one form and grieve the disappearance of another. But to me, dying may be inevitable, but death isn't a thing any more than birth. Here's another reason for entertaining that possibility. Our dad had chosen to let his body rest where it was for a few hours. I volunteered to spend some time with it. I'd done that decades before for a close friend who died utterly unexpectedly. I knew it would be a moving time, literally. Although Dad was not breathing, millions, if not billions, of microorganisms were breathing his body, transforming it. His chest wriggled with life, although he was no longer occupying it. Birthing and dying are ever present in every moment. Is there a moment when life isn't present in death, or death in birth? I suspect that plenty of microorganisms die as new life is born. Lamming made that ever-presence and dying of dying and birthing acutely clear. They live side by side. Is it why grief feels so like a war? Instinctively, we can't believe in endings. One makes space for the other. The husk cloaks and then gives way to the seed. The life of the waxing and waning moon depends on its ability to move from one cycle to the other. When one appears to end and when the other arrives is a little fuzzy. Life continues, although the space which replaces a form makes it look vastly different. When I relinquish hope of something staying the same, sadness and gladness rhyme. Perhaps there's a reason. The Irish rituals of grieving include the crack of storytelling and laughter along with tears. Celebrating both is how I choose to honour the constant, the mystery of life, which always carries the possibility of the unexpected, and which I find infinitely more stimulating than hope. So here's the PS cheekily sneaking in before the conclusion. The ram decided to make a miraculous recovery. We'll never know exactly why, but he's now playing in the field with the orphans as the welcome sun beats down on a late harvest. His part in creating the birthing process is soon approaching. As for reframing the question my friend seeded from asking, has love grown alongside the lambs? It shifts into the much more recent past and presents itself as a conclusion, weaving all these elements together in a raggle-taggle gypsy kind of a way. Warning, you may not like it. I didn't when it hit me first. Conclusion. Tracy's question reframes itself from, has love grown alongside the lambs, to, is love living and dying alongside the lambs? My love for a particular form lives and dies, making room, however slowly, for a reformation, a reformation to appear. It may even carry the same name tag. Memories, oh, they're both salve and salt. Am I embracing, I ask myself, all the answers that I gave earlier, or excluding one or the other? And I realise I've been adrift, so keen to include them all at once as evidence of the ever-presence of love, that I've been stretched to breaking point, attempting to witness, if you like, all the weather at the same time and call it good. Maybe to accept reality is to honour each answer in turn, as if they're part of an ever-spiralling cycle. Let me shorten the question a third time to bring it home to us. Is love growing and dying for you right now? Yes and or no? Neither, the space of not knowing, and or both, knowing. Perhaps this is a cycle and pattern which repeatedly turns us to yes. As of the last 24 hours, my answer's been changing, born out of the daring to include no. No, love is not sometimes here. I denied the no. Through its teary waters, I'm led towards the emptiness of neither, not really knowing. I'm back home to and or both, and on again to yes. It's the living of the spiral which makes life replete and expansive, yes, even as it contracts. I respect wherever you are in this spiral, and that accepting the no may be the biggest challenge of all. Digging ever deeper, I wonder if this is because the no is actually a lie. But how else could unconditional love be unconditional if it didn't allow for something other than its nature to exist? Do lies exist? Oh my goodness, you don't need me to tell you. And I think instantly I'm with Derek Sivers here when he suggests nothing is true. But when I really accept and inspect my no, I discover a paradox. It's far easier to sit with it when it's fully embraced and tended to. Embraced? Tended to? Those are qualities of what? Love. And I find I'm no longer with Derek Sivers, but find everything is true, although the truth can never be found. A resounding or whispered no can include the yes too. A resounding or whispered no can include the yes too. I leave you with this thought in accepting reality. So thank you for listening to this long, rambling, intimate and paradoxical musing. May it birth something fresh and yet familiar within you, and perhaps also enable you to die to whatever this moment is now, or has been, and to the new this moment of now. I want to especially share and offer this musing to the two Daniels who came to heart in the penning of it. P.S. There's always a P.S. with me. You ought to know that by now. There's a poem which I learnt in childhood and sang and still sing, which seems to me to echo some of the threads here. It's entitled, suitably, Love, and it's by Mary Baker Eddy. The last stanza reads, "Thou to whose power our hope we give, surrender, free us from human strife. Fed by thy love divine we live, for love alone is life, and life most sweet as heart to heart speaks kindly when we meet and part. And a final PPS. Although hope is unhelpful, and I do my best to relinquish it, there is a kind of good hope which remains. It's a hope which doesn't depend on external circumstances or a story, that doesn't diminish confidence into a maybe. It's an inner self-trusting in the basis of our intentions, or true love of love. And the other Wednesday, I visited Good Hope Farm, which reignited that trusting. And you can listen or read my poetic review of it if you press the link below. Thanks so much for listening. And I will meet you again in the next lambing learning, which you will be delighted to hear has nothing to do with birthing or dying. Bye for now.